We start with you, Cynthia Freeland. Which quarterback has the most favorable matchup this week?
Well, it's favorable for two reasons. One, because Russell Wilson is playing just absolutely lights out. And two, because I predict this to be a closer than expected game. So they won't just necessarily run away with it. So Russell Wilson's going to have to stay passing outside the numbers and deep, where he's been just ridiculous. I mean, there's a lot of places he's been ridiculous, but outside the numbers and deep is his specialty this season in a game that will be closer than expected against Minnesota.
I'm looking at Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Two Gloves has a really great matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, who are giving up the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Teddy himself, actually, he's 6th in passing yards, which might surprise you. The problem fantasy-wise is that he has just 4 passing touchdowns, but the Falcons have given up 13 scores through the air, most in the NFL. He's a good streaming option if you've got Aaron Rodgers, who's on a bye, or you just have a quarterback matchup that you don't feel 100% about.
I like Teddy Bridgewater a lot, but if he's gone, I would actually take a look at Kirk Cousins. Now, to me, if Kirk Cousins was a Nicolas Cage role, I would say he was like his character in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, where it's like, it's a good movie, but he wasn't the best part of it. And I think that lends itself to Kirk Cousins here. Great matchup. He's not the best part of it, although he has thrown 4 touchdown passes in the last 2 games. The Seahawks have allowed a top 12 fantasy quarterback in every game this season, including Ryan Fitzpatrick last week. So Kirk Cousins has got a pretty safe floor.
Yeah, earlier this season he was more Ghost Rider, but before he got the superpowers, when he wasn't among the living. All right, let's look over at running backs here. Who's got a good matchup here this week?
Well, Todd Gurley certainly does, and I know he scored twice on Monday Night Football against the Green Bay Packers, but Carolina has allowed a top 3 fantasy running back in 3 of the last 4 weeks. So I do believe that this is going to be a game that's going to have a lot of points scored. The Falcons' defense is not amongst the league's best, so we're anticipating Carolina scoring a lot. The only thing that's troubling about this is that Gurley is not involved in the passing game enough, but I still think the potential for a touchdown, a rushing touchdown, is there, so it makes it a good start for me.
Yeah, same theme, same game for me, Reg. I'm staying there, and I'm going with Mike Davis on the other side, who's not quite done McCaffrey-esque damage through the air. Nobody does, but he has done damage. And here it's a game against a defense that, as we know, is extremely vulnerable. Davis is averaging 22.6 points a game in the last 2 weeks. I think you wouldn't be wrong to expect him to go north of 30 against the Falcons defense that comes in 6 days after Aaron Jones could have had 60 points if the Packers had wanted him to.
Well, I'm not going to project 60 points because that would be ridiculous, but I am going to project Ezekiel Elliott to have an amazing week yet again. I mean, he has the 4th most touches and the 5th most points among running backs so far this season, and more than 17 fantasy points in every single game. The Giants have allowed a top 10 fantasy running back in 2 of the last 3 games. And I know we've been talking a lot about Dak Prescott and this passing offense, but they'd be smart to keep it on the ground and not let their defense, which has been very vulnerable, be on the field.
Marcus Grant, the Minnesota Vikings have kept it on the ground a lot, but how do you feel about the week for Adam Thielen?
Well, you heard Adam Rank talk about streaming Kirk Cousins this week, and I think you got to for sure go with the guy who's his top target, Adam Thielen, getting a team-high more than 32.5% target share. By the way, have we talked this season about starting your wide receivers against the Seahawks? Because you should. Seattle's given up over 1,300 yards through the air to wide receivers. No other team has allowed more than 845. Teams also not really running the ball against the Seahawks, in part because Seattle's putting up so many points that you have to throw the football. So I think this is a game where Kirk Cousins, Adam Thielen, they're going to have to do some work for Minnesota to stay in it.
You talk about starting a wide receiver against a defense. You have to start your wide receivers against this Jets defense, and DeAndre Hopkins is in a great position to take advantage of this. The Jets have allowed 32.8 points per game this season. That's the 3rd most in the NFL, and 30 or more points in 3 straight games. Nuke's had 20-plus fantasy points in 3 of 4 games this season. His 34% target share is number 2 amongst wide receivers. The Cardinals need to kind of get it right after 2 games that were winnable that they did not win. I think this is a game where Nuke just goes off.
A theme here in wide receivers, we're all chasing defenses. I'm chasing the Falcons again, and I'm going Robbie Anderson. Fun fact, there's only 4 guys in the league who have more than 5 catches every single game. That's Amari, CeeDee Lamb, Nuke Hopkins, and Mr. Anderson. I don't need to say much more about the Falcons defense. I'm very confident in Robbie Anderson this week. But on that topic of competence, let's welcome in the 5th member of our team, Maurice Jones-Drew, who's coming in for MJD's Guarantee. MJD, it's time. Let's tell the people what you are absolutely 100% certain is going to happen this week.
Well, Patrick, there was a lot of big news this week. And I'm talking about down in Houston where Bill O'Brien gets fired. Normally when a coach gets fired, the players tend to ball out. So I'm going to say this, and it sucks because they're going against my Jacksonville Jaguars. But Deshaun Watson, you can guarantee 35-plus fantasy points. And I'm going to tell you why. This defense has been giving up a little bit in the passing game. And normally when your coach gets fired, you have to rally the troops. Deshaun Watson's been playing better and better each week. They just haven't got the victories. I feel like Deshaun Watson's going to take over this game. Imagine throwing the ball to, or not imagine, but he's going to throw the ball to David Johnson out of the back. We saw Joe Mixon have a big day. Will Fuller will have a big day. His schedule is favorable to this point. Deshaun Watson, I can guarantee 35 picks.
Back with the FedEx ground rankings with Cynthia Freeland. Cynthia, you have crunched the numbers, as you are wont to do, and have got your top 10 running backs this week. Let's see them. Give them to the people.
All right, here they are. You got it? Many of them were on Adam Rank's start and assist list. Much like the family man that Adam Rank is, I love that Nicolas Cage movie. I actually want to start with Josh Jacobs at Kansas City. Kansas City, who've allowed the 5th most rushing yards per game this season, 161, 5.3 yards per rush, which is 2nd most in the NFL. And of course, Josh Jacobs actually has 24 touches a game, which is good for 2nd most in the entire NFL. Now, game script-wise, I don't necessarily think the Raiders are going to keep it on the ground late in the game, meaning I think they're going to be playing with a sizable disadvantage, so they're going to be playing from behind. But that's fine because just as you see, those short passes are a way that Jacobs really gets into the game. And secondly, James Robinson, I want to point out, at Houston. MJD told us about how Houston, when the coach is gone, the team balls out. And that's kind of good on both ends because the Houston Texans defense has been giving up all of the yards. They've allowed a 100-yard rusher in 3 of 4 games. The most rushing yards per game, 181.8. That is a ridiculous number of rushing yards. So you want to take advantage of the fact that James Robinson is kind of this low-key. We talk about him here on this show, but he's a little low-key in terms of national media. That's why you got to watch our show because we talk about James Robinson.
Yeah, give it to the people here. That's what we do here on NFL Fantasy Live. Thanks, Cynthia. Those running backs may be hard to find for those of us scraping the bottom of the barrel, though, at running back. The flex spot could be a little tricky. Marcus Grant, please help us out.
We will do our best, Patrick. It is time to fix my flex. You guys sent us some flex questions via Twitter, so Maurice Jones-Drew and I will try to answer them. We're going to flex right here, exactly. So we'll start with you. This one's for you, MJD. Gennaro's asking, Hollywood Brown, Darius Slayton, or Jamison Crowder in a full PPR league?
Well, for me, it's all about matchup. We're in week 5. We know what defenses are going to be. So I'm going to go with Darius Slayton. I know the New York Giants haven't been the most explosive offense, but the Dallas Cowboys have allowed the #1 fantasy wide receiver in 3 straight weeks. So if I'm a guy and I have Slayton on my roster, he's going to automatically either move into my flex or wide receiver 2 position because this defense has just been giving it up. And Daniel Jones, and they can't run the ball. They've struggled with the run, so they're going to try to take the top off and throw the ball down the field.
All right, this next one is from Fred Fantastica, which I'm pretty sure is Fred Flintstone's stage name when he was a magician. Anyway, DJ Moore or Antonio Gibson in PPR. I went back and forth on this one, but I'm going to go with DJ Moore because I feel like if there's ever an opportunity for him to step up and have a performance that we're waiting on, this is the week. Atlanta has allowed more yards after the catch than any team in the league, and that's really what's been missing from Moore's game this year. His target share is actually greater. He's running more downfield routes. It's just that his yards after the catch are down. So this is an opportunity for him to sort of make some plays, do some things with the ball in his hand. So like I said, it's been tough to kind of figure him, but if there's ever a matchup to play him, this is the one. All right, finally, from VA Tech Hokies 17, must be a UVA alum, right? Got to be, right? Obviously. Justin Jefferson, Robert Woods, or Deontay Johnson in a PPR league?
Well, again, I'm looking at matchups. I don't like Johnson versus the Eagles defense or Robert Woods versus the football team. So I'm going to go with Justin Jefferson. And Rank talked about it. You want to play Kirk Cousins. You want to get as many Vikings receivers in this situation. The Seattle Seahawks defense against the run is pretty good, but against the pass is not so good. And Justin Jefferson is going to see that second corner. He's not going to be followed by the top guy. And Kirk Cousins has been on point. And anytime a guy can do the giddy dance 10 yards on the way to the end zone, I want him in my roster. Just so happened a couple weeks ago I dropped him. And I know this isn't like, therapy, but I actually dropped him to pick someone else up, and then he went off. So now I'm still sad about it. I have trauma. I'm scarred.
Now, we know nothing's a sure thing in fantasy football. Even some players who seem like must-starts might not be money in Week 5. It's time for Mo Money, Mo Problems with Maurice Jones-Drew. MJD, let's start with Miles Sanders, who faces the Steelers defense in Week 5. Will he be Mo Money or Mo Problems this week?
Well, Patrick, this is a flat-out problem to me. And it's less about Miles Sanders, more about the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. I don't want any running back or any quarterback that's going against the Steelers defense. They played lights out, and then they had a bye week. And on top of that, the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line has been banged up. Guys are all over IR. They're on their third left tackle. Lane Johnson's dealing with an ankle. They just have some issues. So for me, Miles Sanders is a problem.
One of the top graded defenses against the pass and against the run. They're pretty good. And elsewhere, everyone's rushing to get Kareem Hunt back into their lineup with Nick Chubb out. But the Colts defense, they've allowed the fourth fewest fantasy points to running backs this year. So MJD, Mo Money or Mo Problem?
Oh, Kareem Hunt is Mo Money, Mo Money, Mo Money.
Cash,
and I'm gonna tell you why.
Cash.
That's right, cash. And I'm going to tell you why. I could care less about what the Colts defense are going to do. As we're seeing here, Kareem Hunt can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can run the ball in between the tackles. And let's not forget, when he was in Kansas City, he was an all-pro. He finally gets his opportunity. He's on a team that wants to run the ball. He will get his opportunity, his touches. And the Colts gave up 17 fantasy points to Dalvin Cook in Week 1. After that, they played the Giants without Barkley. They played the Jets without Bell. I like Kareem Hunt this week, as you can tell. That kind of rhymes.
Yeah,
too.
Kareem Hunt gets to keep his quarterback. Yeah, right? Terry McLaurin doesn't get to keep his quarterback. He had double-digit fantasy points every game this year. Now he's got a different quarterback. Maybe he can draw some Jalen Ramsey at some point during this matchup. Is he money or problems this week?
Well, Patrick, don't you worry. Scary Terry is Mo Money for me. And get it, I am rambling.
Mo money.
That is right. And listen, the thing is, they've moved him around so much, and I don't know if the Rams are just going to lock Jalen Ramsey on the whole time. And even if they do, they're going to put him in different situations to be successful. I believe that Kyle Allen's going to target him because he is one of the only weapons that the Washington football team has. And so, just like he was with Dwayne Haskins, I think you're going to see the same production and same opportunity. I believe Terry McLaurin has to make plays. I got him on my fantasy team anyway, so he's in the flex. So he has to do something for us. If he doesn't, then I'm sorry.
Yeah, we'll see. The coaching staff obviously thinks this is a better move. Maybe it will be better for Terry McLaurin as they're calling plays for him as well. That's Mo Money, Mo Problems with Maurice Jones-Drew. From there, we go to stock up, stock down, as we are looking at some players whose fantasy stock has been a roller coaster this season. 2 good weeks, yay. 2 bad weeks, oh no. Trying to predict where their fantasy futures are headed. Cynthia, we'll start with you. You are the most financially savvy, most capable with calculators among us. Matt Ryan started off really good, and then he was not good. What do you project for Week 5?
I mean this in all sincerity, but the best use of my MBA is to tell you that there is an up and to the right green arrow that you need to draw on this nice little graph here. I have about 18 fantasy points for him projected in this matchup. Why? I know Carolina's defense is good, but this is a situation where the Falcons need to get right. 63% of their plays have been passes this season. That's the 6th most in the NFL. He's had 23 fantasy points in 2 games with 2+ touchdowns. This is the get-right situation that they need. It's getting to be desperation time for the Atlanta Falcons, and Matt Ryan will do everything he can in order to make that happen for his team and for your fantasy team.
All right, Marcus, Darrell Henderson's role has been somewhere between feature back and not feature back. On your graphing calculator here, where do you apply his future?
Well, apparently he's going to stay in the not feature back role. The arrow is going to move up very slightly. I've got him at about 5 points this week. So it's mostly going horizontal with a slight uptick there. It's just not going to be a good situation for Darrell Henderson. I mean, Cam Akers is expected to come back this week. We know Malcolm Brown is still back there and available. Sean McVay's given no indication that he plans to stick to one feature back at any point this season. And then he's got the Washington football team. Their defense has been very tough on running backs, allowing the 8th fewest fantasy points per game here. I want 0 parts of anybody in that Rams backfield this week.
Marcus, give us the FedEx Air rankings for Thursday.
That's right, Patrick. I'm going to go with some guys you want to start and some guys you want to sit in Thursday's Buccaneers-Bears matchup. We'll take a look first on the start side. Look, I will say that I'm being very stingy about who I am starting this week. Mike Evans and Allen Robinson. On the sit side, there's certainly a lot more guys that I am kind of staying away from. Anthony Miller's an interesting one because he's starting to be surpassed by Darnell Mooney in that Bears passing game. But let's look at Allen Robinson. I mean, he's got a pretty safe weekly floor. He's had 9 or more targets in every game this season, 12 or more fantasy points in 3 of the 4 games he's played so far this year. And look, throughout his year, his career, I should say, but especially this year, he's been quarterback proof. He's getting targets, he's getting yards, whether it's been Mitch Trubisky or Nick Foles at quarterback. On the other side, I'm saying sit Scotty Miller. He's a guy that I'm certainly concerned about. He is coming into this week questionable, as we've seen so far, with hip and groin injuries. So certainly keep an eye on his status as we get closer to kickoff on Thursday. But I'm also just generally worried about a high ceiling, low floor guy, which is what Miller is, going up against a good defense on Thursday night. My general philosophy is if I'm not 100% about a guy, I tend to stay away from him and see if I can find a similar or better option coming up on Sunday.
We're focused on 3 players who had their first big fantasy day last week, like Joe Mixon, Cynthia.
Okay, so Joe Mixon has an interesting projection here because as you see, the floor and the upstairs are closer to each other, whereas the ceiling really reflects that touchdown. This is 100% a function of the fact that he is facing Baltimore. Baltimore that's allowing the 9th fewest fantasy points per game to running backs this season. And let's be honest, we've seen some really not so good play from that Cincinnati Bengals O-line. The O-line against Calais Campbell and all of those wreckers, that's going to be tough sledding for Joe Mixon, but the volume is absolutely there. So you want to say, okay, if I'm looking for upside, he's there.
All right, so that's the look at Joe Mixon, who had a good week. Odell had an amazing week, Cynthia. How does his house look this week?
Well, spoiler alert here. I actually have the Browns pulling off the upset of the Colts in this one, and part of that is because they've gotten Odell going. They're having fun. They're doing what, Odell and Jarvis Landry, making it just happen in this one. So for me, this is not an indictment of the fact that Indianapolis has a good defense. It's not about that. It's the fact that this is iron sharpening iron. This is Odell Beckham Jr. being excellent and in a situation where they've gotten this offense clicking on all cylinders for me here. I like the projection here. I would absolutely err on the side of because the upstairs and the ceiling are so close, I think that touchdown's going to happen again in this one.
Yeah, Browns fans will be happy to hear about that performance, which will probably lead to a Baker Mayfield performance if Odell plays that well. Let's look over at Amari Cooper, the receiver, on the other side of Odell's excellence last week, Cynthia.
Yeah, so this is another one where there's a really nice upstairs and ceiling in this one. Look, the Giants are a good defense to target. And you look to see this offense for the Cowboys is a strong offense all over. I already told you how much I liked Ezekiel Elliott. I also like Amari Cooper. That's a sign that I think this is going to be a closer than expected game. The Cowboys are not going to run away with this. Daniel Jones, they're going to have some success on the other side, meaning Amari Cooper will still be targeted late in this game. I think it's a really interesting matchup when you go to see who is he going to exactly pair up against in terms of corners. Advantage Amari Cooper, big time. And by the way, it always is better to do the house projections from my house. They're just more accurate this way.